Growing up, we all had those things that we just clinged on to. They were our obsessions. They were the things that helped us get through the most important times of our lives. For some kids, that may have been sports. For others, maybe it was learning an instrument. But for me personally, it was anime. I didn't particularly have the most smooth childhood, but because of anime, and this may sound extreme, but it's true, I was able to have some of my fondest memories as a kid because of it. I truly believe it helped me get through the darkest times of my life, particularly when I was a child and teenager. And I didn't really see my childhood as this negative atmosphere that I had because of it. And I still don't to this day, even though I had challenges during this hard time. Anime was a comfort for me, and manga. It was a place to escape to new worlds. Now, let it be known, it wasn't only anime that helped me cope. I also had a very loving and supportive family, amongst many other things. But anime was definitely a definitive moment in my childhood and teenage years. It helped give me a sense of identity and even community. And I feel that you and others can probably relate to this. So I wanted to go back in time and relive some of those core nostalgic memories that I had as a child getting into anime. I think some of these may even bring back memories for you. Now, it should be known that I was born in the early 90s in the Midwest of the US. I grew up in a pretty small town in the countryside, so you may not have experienced everything that I have. But I do think that some of my experiences may be somewhat universal. I had a pretty typical introduction to anime through the ravaging phenomenon of Pokemon through the late 90s and early 2000s. My earliest memories were waking up at 7 a.m. on the weekdays, getting up to watch Pokemon first thing in the morning on WB Kids. Back then, we had VHS, so you were able to schedule and record live TV. Although I think I actually usually got up early enough to watch it, I still made sure my parents helped me record it so I could go back and rewatch it after school again. This was the start of my absolute obsession of Pokemon. And as any 90s kid would do, I had to have the trading cards. The trading cards were huge at my school. This is actually how I first got exposed to it. A kid who I will forever remember brought in these cards and I was instantly hooked, completely mesmerized. Some of the cards were shiny, also known as holographic. They presented these colorful and detailed unknown creatures, and they had a bunch of text that I would say 98% of us ignored. None of us knew how to play the damn game. We just wanted our own collectibles to look at and trade. Most kids just traded based on rarity or if it was a holographic card. It quickly became a problem though. Kids were fighting over cards trying to do a trade. Some kids would even steal your cards. As you can imagine, that brought a lot of screaming, crying children to their parents at home. And the schools most definitely heard about it. This caused a school-wide ban on Pokemon cards. We were absolutely devastated. But of course, that didn't stop some kids still bringing them in and then getting sent home. Trading cards were a big part of my nostalgia with Pokemon, but it definitely didn't end there. I played every Pokemon game known to man. Yellow, blue, red. Later on, playing Pokemon Stadium, Hey You Pikachu, Pokemon Snap, Pokemon Pinball, and God knows what else. I would actually love to get my hands on a copy of Pokemon Pinball. I just remember it had this weird contraption on top for haptic feedback, I think. I also have a memory, which I'm not very proud of, where I ended up playing the Pokemon trading card game on PC during my dad's entire birthday party. I'm still sorry about that to this day, Dad. I collected any kind of Pokemon merch that I could get my 8-year-old hands on, such as a tin metal lunchbox, t-shirts, McDonald's toys, plushes, and probably so many others. Yeah, I know. I was a very privileged kid. I acknowledge that. The fondest memories of the movie theater I had growing up were going to see the Pokemon movies and getting that limited edition card, baby, or the ones that you would get when you bought the VHS. To this day, I still vividly remember that ancient Mew and the intake card that I got. I watched Digimon every now and then when I couldn't get my Pokemon fix. I remember my dad took me to see the Digimon movie in 2000, and 8-year-old me thought it was the coolest, most badass movie ever, despite not being a huge Digimon fan. I don't care what Rotten Tomatoes says, it was a 10 out of 10 for me. Eventually, as I got older, probably around 12, Pokemon started to play less of a role in my life. I would still occasionally play the games, but that was about the extent of it. And to be honest, I still do play those games and probably have played every game up to date. I don't know what they put in those games. It's like crap. As Pokemon started to fizzle out for me, I did not know that a whole new world of anime was about to be opened to me. As I had mentioned in my previous video, Gen Z made anime cool, I accidentally stumbled upon anime again on a channel called Adult Swim. I was a bored 12-year-old just surfing through the hundreds of channels that we had on satellite TV. I quickly stopped at a channel that was playing something that seemed quite familiar. It kind of looked like Pokemon, but I immediately realized that it wasn't based on the horrifying bad word that I just heard. Damn. I know, very controversial for my 12-year-old self. Actually, if I'm being real, I've been exposed to way worse media earlier on in my life. And my parents, who usually watch this video, love ya, know probably exactly where this is going. When our family got together one year, and I think I was like 9, we all went to go see Harold and Kumar go to White Castle. I kid you not. Honestly, my parents were the real OGs. They did not give up. But anyways, I could tell that this anime that I was seeing right before my eyes was totally different to what I had been exposed to in the past, like Pokemon or Digimon. It felt like everything you shouldn't be watching at 12, but hey, that was the thrill of it. The very first anime that I had stumbled upon after Pokemon was Inuyasha, an anime now that holds a very dear and special place in my heart. I loved everything about it. The animation was different from anything I had ever seen, and yet so beautiful. The worlds they built, you felt like you were in them. The storytelling was an integral part of the show where they continue off from the last episode. I knew from that very moment that I tuned into Inuyasha that I wanted more. There must have been more out there. I quickly developed an interest for catching Adult Swim each night. I would tune in to watch Inuyasha specifically, but would stick around for other shows after, and eventually found shows like Full Metal Alchemist and Samurai Champloo. I got that amazing feeling once again that I got for Pokemon. I would tell some of my friends hoping they would feel the same. Unfortunately, a lot of people back then just didn't get it, which is fine, to each their own, but there definitely was a stigma towards it. As I had mentioned, I grew up in the countryside of the Midwest US. And as you may have guessed, it was predominantly white. I mean, I grew up next to a cornfield and cows. Without the chronic usage of the internet back then, I think something so foreign such as this was off-putting to some people. But of course, there were other people in my school that I eventually found that were also into anime and manga. Some new friends and old friends alike. It was one of the greatest feelings to have friends that you could share this special niche interest with. We would trade pages and pages of notes with little chibi drawings and some of our new findings of anime. We would trade anime box sets with each other, burn CDs with our favorite intro and outro anime songs. It was truly a golden and cherished time of my life. Back in the 2000s, anime wasn't as popular and it wasn't accessible as it is today. Streaming wasn't really a thing just yet. I remember in my small town, we had a Blockbuster. Every Friday, me and my family would get Chinese takeout, and then we would go over to the Blockbuster to grab a movie or two to take home. Slowly over the years, our Blockbuster would sparingly stock anime. It was typically a Miyazaki movie or maybe that one-off Inuyasha movie, but man, did it make me excited to see it. At the time, that was the only way I knew to get my hands on anime other than waiting for something to come on Adult Swim. Adult Swim was great, but as with any channel, if you missed it live, you were missing the chronological order of the series and may not have a clue what's going on in the next episode. Luckily, Adult Swim did usually play repeats throughout the night though. Eventually, I discovered that Best Buy sold anime, and a lot of it. I was like a kid in a candy shop. So many series I never heard or seen. I swear I could have just sat in that aisle for an hour or two just looking through all the anime box sets. I could finally binge an entire series in one afternoon. But this wasn't without the huge price tag. Sometimes a box set would go up to $100. And this was in the mid to late 2000s. I didn't have that kind of money as a young teenager. So whenever I had my birthday or Christmas or some kind of holidays, or I did my chores and got money for it, all that money was saved up for my anime obsession. I remember one time I was staying at my grandma's house for one weekend, who lived in another small town about an hour away from mine, and she had given me $20 to spend on whatever I wanted. Again, I was a very privileged kid. My grandma definitely spoiled me. There was a media store in town that sold various entertainment items, such as CDs, DVDs, and magazines. We decided we would go there and check it out, possibly getting a CD. But to my astonishment, they had an entire anime section. Again, I was absolutely mesmerized by this. I had known that they sold anime at a huge franchise like Best Buy, but it was pretty shocking to see that they sold anime in such a small town and such a small store. I honestly considered this town even more country where my grandma lived than where I was from. My grandma was also in shock, but for another reason. She didn't have a clue what anime was, but I don't think she exactly got the best first impressions when she saw the front of some of those box sets. There were usually half-naked characters on them. My innocence just looked past it, but it's pretty funny to look back on now. In fact, I had so many embarrassing memories like that. My family probably thought there was something seriously wrong with me. I haven't talked about it much yet, but I did consume quite a bit of manga as well. And that's where I think it was pretty obvious to my parents that this wasn't always so kid-friendly. The manga would have different age-appropriate ratings, much like how video games do. And some of the series that I would be reading were 18+ rating, like Absolute Boyfriend or Chobits. Actually, those are probably some of the least suggestive ones that I can think of, but I can't remember the names. I would be reading it at school or in front of my parents, and I would flip a page and bam, nudity. Just nudity that you could not miss on the full page if you were looking in my general direction. I would get pretty embarrassed by this, but damn. I swear so many of the series, at least back then, were so suggestive and had some form of nudity in it. And keep in mind, I was somewhere around 13, 14, 15. But I mean, as I had previously mentioned, I did see Harold and Kumar go to White Castle as a kid. So my parents are pretty chill, thankfully. Maybe they just thought it wasn't possible for me to get any weirder as a child. Manga was something I got into shortly after anime, as one does. This was a natural progression for me because I enjoyed comics as a kid. I would read Sabrina the Teenage Witch, Archie, and the classic Calvin and Hobbes. When I discovered that there was a comic version of anime, it combined those two things I loved together. What was great about manga at this time is that it was much more accessible to myself as a young teenager than anime. I don't know what they cost today, but they used to be somewhere around $10 for each volume, whereas each box set of anime was nearly $100. Admittingly though, a single volume of manga usually only took about an hour to finish. During the 2000s, the mall was a huge third place for teenagers. Our parents would drop us off for an hour or two, and we'd just hang out at the food court and window shop at all the different stores. One of my favorite places to go would be Walden Books. R.I.P. Walden Books was in about every mall, no matter the size. You were lucky if you had a huge Barnes & Noble store, but Walden Books was perfect enough for me. They would have a large section in the back that was fully dedicated to manga. It was heaven on earth as a kid. They would have several different comfy armchairs throughout the store where you could just sit down and get a taste of what you were about to buy. Now, that may be the case with the book, but as I mentioned, a single volume of manga really only took about an hour or two. So what did I do? I would go sit in Walden Books the entire time and read as much manga as I possibly could. Free of charge. Is it theft? I don't know. They put the chairs in there for a reason. I just don't think they thought through the fact that I could read an entire book in one sitting. But it worked. I mean, it really wasn't any different than picking up a book and reading it at the library, right? Okay, maybe it's a little different, but that brings me to my other point. Libraries. We didn't have Kindles or Nooks back then, and even when they did come out, they weren't fully supported by libraries, let alone be able to do full-on images for comics or manga. So I would go to the library for the sole purpose to check out a manga or read an entire manga while it was there. Yes, surprisingly, even my small town had a decent collection of manga. I vividly remember them having several volumes of Fruit Basket, Cardcaptor Sakura, and Bleach. Sometimes it was a bit of a pain because someone had already checked out the next volume that you needed and you were waiting for weeks. The real blessing were the manga that had several different volumes into one book, although sometimes a bit too thick to be able to turn the pages comfortably. With the discovery of anime and manga also came the discovery of Japanese pop culture. As I had mentioned previously, in middle school, me and a friend would burn CDs and trade our favorite anime intro and outro songs. The music was one of my favorite aspects of anime. Anime was such a massive industry in Japan that they could get big-time Japanese rock bands and pop artists to write and perform these songs for anime. Inuyasha was my first mature anime, so I have very fond memories of the songs from it. There was Fukai Mori by Do Is Infinity, Dearest by Ayumi Hamazaki, Every Heart by Boa. So many good songs. This ultimately got me into the world of Japanese pop, or J-pop for short. As someone who was always passionate about music from a young age, I absolutely loved it. I never put into thought the fact that there was a world of other music out there. Foreign music. Some of my favorites included Ayumi Hamazaki, Kumi Koda, Yui, Nami Amuro, but my ultimate favorites, and I mean absolutely obsessed, were Utada Hikaru and Ayotsuka. I still jam to that shit today. They're so timeless. And it was to the point where I would learn the lyrics in Japanese and look up the translations as well. Also, I wasn't a huge gamer, but because of the anime aesthetics, I was really into Kingdom Hearts. And Utada Hikaru opened up with a absolute banger, Simple and Clean. I immediately became a fan of hers. Maybe I was a full-on weeb, but I had fun with it at least. Before, I was really only listening to J-pop, but eventually one of my friends introduced me into Dear and Grey, and it sparked a whole other obsession with J-rock. Dear and Grey was an extremely popular rock band in Japan, and somehow they made their way into the Western market as well. Now, they weren't huge in the US by any means, but they were popular enough to sell their CDs within stores at least. They also did several tours in the US. And I don't mean just a few stops. They would do a full-on tour with 15 different cities. I started to regularly listen to J-rock, and occasionally even my dad would stick around for a bit to listen to a song or two. Funny enough, this music and this genre of J-rock was highly inspired by hair metal in the 80s. I think he found it amusing because it's what he listened to growing up and still loves today. Rock and roll with huge wild hair and crazy caked on faces of makeup. There was a specific term for this type of music, Visual K. The groups I was really into at the time were The Gazette, Garugamesh, Dear and Grey, and Despair's Ray. I actually saw Despair's Ray on the Taste of Chaos tour in 2008 with a good friend of mine and my dad. Bless his heart. I was very deep into these music scenes. I would try cutting my hair like they would in Visual K. I would follow forums on fashion and style. Hell, I was in guilds on Neopets dedicated to it. Shout out to Momo wherever you are out there who would send me your personal Japanese lesson books all the way from Vancouver. Other than music, it led me to other things like Japanese dramas. Whatever you do, for the love of God, please do not watch 1 Liter of Tears unless you want to actually cry a liter of tears. That shit ruined me for life. Lastly, as I previously mentioned, I was a teenage mall rat. So besides Walden Books, I also hung out at Hot Topic. Hot Topic nowadays has entire sections dedicated to anime and Japanese pop culture. And believe it or not, Hot Topic has been that way for a long time. Even in the early 2000s, when it wasn't nearly as popular as it is today, they still had a whole section dedicated to anime merch. T-shirts, hoodies, CDs, plushes, magazines, you name it. So of course I would rock a Full Metal Alchemist t-shirt with Edward, Al, and Wenbury on the front. It's no wonder I got made fun of in school. Also, does anyone remember Otaku USA? That magazine was the absolute shit. I had a subscription and be the most excited that I'd get every 2 months when that would hit my mailbox. I had so many fond memories of anime and manga in my childhood. In fact, it was a bit difficult making this video because more and more memories would just keep popping up in my head. But also, I don't want to make this a 3-hour video and bore you all. Although liking anime in the 2000s usually deemed you as uncool, I didn't mind it at all. I still have some of my closest friends to this day where we were brought together by it. I still occasionally listen to some of those anime intro and outro songs, and it always brings me to such a golden time of my life. And not to mention that my family was super supportive of my niche interests, no matter how weird or questionable it may have seemed. I'm curious to know if any of this resonated with you. Let me know in the comments down below. I realize that some of this may be specific to me coming from the countryside in the Midwest region of the US, or some of this may not even be specific to the 2000s and you're going through this right now. Either way, I think we can all agree that this is an amazing community and fan base to be a part of. There will always be people who will understand you for you in this area. We're all going through it together, and I think that's all we can ask for. If you have any fun, nostalgic memories you have with anime or manga, Japanese culture, or anything I missed, let me know about those too. And as always, if you like this video, please hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and hit that bell notification to be let know when my next video comes out. Love you all. Bye.